It's currently midnight. This all went down about 45 minutes ago. My brother decided to make a late night run to the grocery store, but on his way back, his tire exploded, so he called my dad to come pick him up from the gas station he managed to pull into. There are some sketchy folk around that area, so my dad suggested we just change the tire and escort him home to make sure the donut didn't go flat too, because it's a fairly old spare. My dad calls me and asks me to bring the tools and a jack so we can change the tire. After the donut is on, my dad goes in front and my brother follows, and I follow behind my brother. We live on a back road off of another back road. Not many houses, lots of farmland, not much traffic, and lots of deer at night. So my dad and I turned on our LEDs that we use when we go off-roading when we got to our road so we could see deer well before they were a hazard. The fields stretch about a quarter mile from the road on either side, and the lights are bright enough so that I can just barely see the tree line past the fields. We get up to a bend in the road where a small patch of woods separates the field from the house beside it, and I see glowing eyes to my left, about 15 feet away from the patch of woods on the field side. There were lots of deer out, so I was on high alert. I slowed down and kept an eye on it. The thing had arms. It had a humanoid shape, a humanoid head. It was not far from the road, so it was lit up pretty bright. I have no doubts in my mind about what I saw. I was going about 15 miles an hour. It wasn't just a quick glimpse. I looked at it for at least 30 seconds before it was out of view. Once I realized that I had never seen anything like what I was seeing, I started honking my horn and pointing so that my brother and dad in front of me would look. But by then, they had already passed the patch of woods and couldn't see it. I would guess it was around 6 to 7 feet tall when standing, but it appeared to be either hunched over or kneeling on the ground. It was resting one elbow on something, and the other arm was straight. I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with Nosferatu, but its head and face looked very similar to his. It looked gaunt and pale, had pointed ears and glowing eyes. I'm sure the glow was because of the lumens I was shining at it, but that at least tells me it's nocturnal. I live in North Carolina, if that helps anyone in figuring out what this is. I'm very concerned because it wasn't far from my home, and I've been hearing very strange noises at night the past few weeks. I took my puppy out to use the bathroom yesterday around 10 p.m., and I could hear something in the forest walking very slow. I know it wasn't a deer because the puppy was barking and it didn't run off. I didn't have a flashlight, so I kept my gun out in case it was a predator and it tried to eat my puppy. It was snapping big sticks, and it sounded heavy. I'm convinced it wasn't a bear, because we don't live in bear country. We've never even seen bear around here, and we go into the woods a lot. We also have a chain link fence all the way around our property line, including in the woods. We inspect it often, and I walked the perimeter today and none of it was damaged. Whatever this is, it's agile and smart enough to climb or jump over a fence without noticeably damaging it. A few months ago, I noticed a lot of scratches on the trees around my house. They were all no less than 7 foot off of the ground. So, in my mind, that took mountain lion out of the equation. If anyone finds this description familiar, please let me know. I was 13 and my cousin was 16. We used to go break into a nearby school at night. For the record, we wouldn't do anything to the property, just kind of wander the halls. To get there, we had to walk about a mile through orchards and fields. There was a road to the school. We decided to take the road that night because the moon was full and it was very bright and pretty. We get to about the halfway point, and we see someone crawl out of the cornfield to our right. They get up and notice us. They were about 20 feet away, so not far. And I could see in great detail the body and face. They were naked, completely hairless, white skin, black eyes, tiny pursed mouth, and backwards hind legs like a dog's. Like the joints weren't humanoid in the hind legs, but the rest of it was. They looked just as startled to see us as we were to see it. They quickly ran towards the orchard on our left. My cousin and I both exchanged dialogue, and when we came to an agreement about what exactly we had both just saw, we decided to head home in a hurry. Now, I'm writing this very formally because I don't want people to think I'm just making up a scary story. I've talked about this before with friends, and they dismissed it as an alien or that I'd been watching too many movies. The thing is, though, we genuinely weren't scared. We were initially confused to see someone crawl out of a cornfield. Concerned, maybe. Then they got up, and the look of surprise on its face matched our own. Alright everyone, so I had a recent encounter with, well, something. I'm not sure what it was, as I never actually saw it. But the encounter seems to be in line with things I've read here and other places. So here it goes. It was approximately 2 weeks ago, just before Halloween. Now, let me start by saying I'm not an avid outdoorsman. I love hiking, and I've spent countless hours in my city's 16 square mile park. But I'm not a mountain man by any means. The park is home to several indigenous mammals, birds, fish, and reptiles, and is full of small ponds, thick brush, and even swampy marshes in spots. There are designated hiking and biking trails that sprawl the area, but there are also several wild areas that aren't really maintained or used. Being that I have an adventurous streak, and that I also hate being around groups of people, I often find myself in these less ventured or wild areas. Now, it's worth noting that I've never really felt uncomfortable in this park. It's kind of like my safe place. I go there to get away, decompress after work, or just be alone sometimes. It feels like a second home in ways. Anyway, enough background information, I'm rambling. I just pulled up to one of the less commonly fished ponds, Beaver Lake, and I intended to circle to the far side, 3/4 mile away from my truck. On one of the hiking trails that goes right next to the tree line, and then into the tree line, and then push further back onto one of the old horse trails. Now this horse trail in particular doesn't get used much anymore. I can't say why for sure, but I've heard a myriad of different reasons from different people. Most logical explanation is that it's just not as convenient to get to anymore, and it gets pretty marshy when it rains. I'd be able to follow the normal hiking trail for the first 3/4 of a mile, but I'd have to fork left off of the trail once it went to the tree line. The gate to the old horse trail was about 500 yards to my 9 o'clock from there, just through an overgrown thicket and up a slight hill. I made my way over to the 4-foot gate and started exploring. I had about an hour and a half before sunset, and I have a strict screw the woods at night policy, so I was watching the time. My main goal for this adventure was to snap some pictures of the area for a project I've been working on. And I'll admit, I was more distracted than I typically am. Anyway, close to an hour passed. I'd gotten some good shots, and I figured now was a good time for my egress. It'd take me close to 30 minutes to get back to my truck, and I wasn't keen on getting stuck in an unfamiliar area at night. I sat my backpack down on a stump, dropped to one knee, and started packing and organizing my stuff. I'm not sure what the catalyst was, but I suddenly felt this terrible sense of dread. I slowly turned and scanned my surroundings. Nothing seemed out of place. I stood up and grabbed my bag. When I took a step forward, a leaf crunched under my boot, and I realized that everything was dead silent. Now, as I said above, I'm not an avid outdoorsman by any means, but I know well enough that silence like that is an indication that a predator is nearby, and you need to quickly but calmly make your way out of the area and stay vigilant. It's worth noting that while mountain lions and black bear are not technically indigenous to my area, there have been more than enough caught and relocated for it to be a valid concern. I've been stalked by a mountain lion on one other occasion, and this felt eerily similar, so that was at the forefront of my mind. I'd been moving for about probably 5 minutes, and everything honestly seemed fine. I'd lulled myself into believing that I was overreacting, and that everything was fine. I didn't see anything, I didn't hear anything. Good, right? Wrong. By this point, the trail was completely overgrown on both sides. I could see fairly clearly behind me, and a decent way ahead. But my left and right may as well have been fall-colored walls. I must have gotten lost in thought for a moment, because I tripped on a root and ate it. As I was picking myself up, I started hearing a soft, cooing or chittering off to my right. It sounded like a mix between a dove and the predator. It would start with a coo, or yelp, and end with this weird chittering sound. I'm actually sitting here trying to replicate it, and I sound ridiculous. I'm not sure my throat is even capable of recreating it. Anyway, I'm out of shape, and there's no way I'm outrunning anything. So I scramble up, planted my feet, and try to make myself look as menacing as a fat 22-year-old with a backpack and glasses can look. About 100 yards ahead of me, which would have originally been behind me had I not fallen, so towards where I had taken the pics and was moving away from, I saw the underbrush start to shake, and it sounded like something was tearing through it. I only had maybe 20 minutes of daylight at this point. and it would take me at least that long to make my way back to my truck. So I did exactly what you're not supposed to do. Naturally, I turned around and I booked it, knowing good and well that I can run for maybe a half mile, 3/4 of a mile if something's trying to kill me, maybe. I could barely hear anything now over my own footfalls and the sound of my heart pounding. But whatever it was chasing me through the underbrush, and it was gaining on me. It may have been 15 yards behind me at this point, and I still had a ways to go. I don't know if fear kept me going or what, but I reached deeper and just kept running. My breathing got shallow, my vision started blurring, and I was honestly about to collapse when I saw the gate to the horse trail about 300 yards ahead of me. This thing is right on top of me by now, and as soon as I came within arm's reach of the gate, I planted my foot on the bottom rung and launched myself over it. My landing was not graceful. I landed on my right shoulder and tumbled several yards down the hill and into a puddle of muck. I wasn't thinking straight now, and I stood up shakily and started making my way toward the tree line and pond. I knew what directions to go, and I didn't even bother finding the hiking trail. I just crashed through the brush and overgrowth like some kind of barbarian. I didn't care about the cuts and scrapes or the massive amount of noise I was making. My only thought was to get out. The chittering noises had stopped, but I still heard something moving in the brush at the top of the hill. It wasn't trying to be quiet anymore either. I finally broke through the tree line and could see my truck parked across the pond at the top of the hill. I finally took a deep breath and started slowly walking away from the tree line. The ominous feeling lifted, and I started making my way up the trail alongside the tree line. I was able to catch my breath for about 15 seconds. I heard that awful cooing and chittering behind me again, and I turned to look back at the tree line behind me. So, at this point, there's trail leading to the tree line in front of me, tree line to my right, water to my left, and trail leading alongside the tree line and around the pond to the cars behind me. The underbrush at the tree line ahead of me started to shake, and fear took over. I'm thankful that my bag is waterproof, and that my phone is water resistant, because I jumped in the pond and swam across. I never really told this story to anyone in my personal life. They'd probably think I'm crazy, and I doubt they'd consider me credible, especially given my interest in Bigfoot and other cryptids. I don't know what was stalking me that day. I know I wound up cold, wet, and a bit shaken up. I also know I've not been back to that part of the park, and I can't come up with a good explanation. Beaver Lake is off limits to me for a while. I think I'll just continue exploring and hanging out on the slightly more populated side of the park. What do you guys think?